Hello everyone who joined us here today. Welcome to our webinar on IoT test automation with Ms. Dilruba Malik. I'm Umayma Mushraf, QA TechTalks event coordinator and moderator. It's a pleasure to be here today as your host. Right before we get started, I'd like to introduce you to the QA TechTalks community. So who are we? We are a community-based startup that's mainly focused on quality assurance, exploratory testing, test automation, and we usually organize a variety of webinars, workshops, and events with speakers globally. Today, we are pleased and honored to have Ms. Dilruba Malik, an engineering manager with over 15 years of experience in hands-on, end-to-end software testing and leading QA manual and automation test engineering teams. Ms. Malik has worked with some of the biggest software companies, including Microsoft, Cisco, and Hitachi. She's joined us here today to speak on IoT test automation. Just a little background on that. The Internet of Things, IoT, is becoming popular day by day. It is able to connect everyday devices, machines, vehicles with the Internet. Now, to understand IoT testing, you will need to know the product technical or architecture before you even start the test strategy. And there are many obstacles to that. Test automation can help resolve some of these issues, while IoT test automation is beginning to or is already challenging the traditional test lifecycle models and test automation tools. Ms. Malik will be discussing some of the benefits and challenges with IoT test automation and how to resolve or minimize these challenges. There will be a lot of takeaways from this webinar, so please be sure to stay tuned till the very end. Also, if any of you have any questions, please drop them in the chat. I'll read them out for you, and if not, you can always turn your mics on. Please note, however, that you will need to raise your hand virtually first to avoid a clash in case another person would like to ask a question at the same time as you. So that's enough for an introduction from my side. I would like to now pass over the mic to Ms. Dilruba Malik to begin with the webinar.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dilruba Malik, as Umaira saying. Thank you, QA Tech Talk community and Umaira for introducing me. As she mentioned, today my topic is IoT test automation. So let's get in there. So Umaira already introduced me. So she already introduced that I have 15 plus years of experience in QA domain. Currently, I'm leading QA team at Palo Alto Networks, which is IoT cybersecurity leader. Previously, I have worked in Microsoft, Cisco, Hitachi. My bachelor is in electrical engineering from Georgia Tech and engineering management and leadership degree from Santa Clara University. And this is just my contact information if anybody would like to connect with me. I'm always there for any Q&A or any personal mentoring. So I'm very active in Omen in Tech as well. So anyone have some question, want to reach out to me, that's how you can reach me. So I want to give a broad agenda overview. So what I'm going to talk about is I'll give a little idea of what is IoT and what are the challenges there and how QA team defined around that and what are the benefit of automation, IoT automation, and how we can approach those and type of automation we need to overcome them, and then overview of different sector like UI, API automation, performance test automation, and then some takeaways. So what is IoT? In simple words, day-to-day simple physical things can be network with where we can send and receive data, right, over wireless network without any human intervention. So the name suggested, it's Internet of Things, right? So it's communicating over internet and all the physical things can connect to it. And the purpose of connecting and transmitting data with other device and system via internet wirelessly. So that's that's what IoT is. And let me go over more detail. So that's why, what are the challenges, right? So since it's a lot of things, it's not small amount of data. It has billions of devices connected to the network. So there are a lot of ways we can test. And when we do the functionality testing or any type of testing, it becomes very, very complicated because it has cross platform, cross network, cross browser. So everything needs to be connected and working properly in order to things to be even testable, right? So testing functionality is very difficult because you have to communicate with UI and then embedded middleware and then backend, and then you have to test across the platform and how it communicate between the devices, third-party application, and test and the actual infrastructure itself. The performance of network communication and internal computation also um, challenging. So each node you have to test thoroughly in order to have a confidence that, okay, we are ready for releasing it. And also testing data protocol also very, very difficult because it's not um, few protocol is available. It's hundreds of protocols are available, and how each device is communicating through it is also need to be tested. And security issues also very important. So let's define QA role to it. Since IoT is getting smarter day by day, the convergence of digital and physical worlds are coming along. And QA have to focus not just the application itself, it have to test beyond device and sensor and think historically about added technical complexity, right? So now you have to think about the volume, you have to think about the velocity, and you have to think about the variety of data, not only the structured data, unstructured data also, how it generated across the smart and connected device. So the QA have to think more holistically than before. When it was just the web testing or just API testing, we just need to think about one type of testing, or maybe database testing and see the actual application performance. Now it go through so many third-party application also in IoT, so you have to think through all part of testing. So what is the benefit of test automation, right? You have to see the faster feedback cycle, and it reduce definitely manual resources, reduce repetitive actions. So if we have to test something again and again, human are error prone, so that is another benefit. Cost of testing, what two people can test automation can do it within an hour or so, right? So it's saving us money. Initial cost of implementation is big for automation, but once we accomplish our goal, it gives a lot of benefit. And then we have test coverage, application feature, and then reliable result and accuracy. It saves times and cost, and human intervention is not required, so it increase efficiency. So why IoT automation? As we were mentioning that IoT testing itself is already complicated, and automation will be even more complicated. So there are a few reasons why we want to do IoT automation. It is basically complex mix of IT data, OT data, as well as embedded system data. So there is a need for this to be automated so that testing cycle can be shorter. And also you have to think about how the architecture, communication, and the transfer of data, how things are stored, analyzed, and the log are stored also. How UI is visualizing the data, and how this report is shown into the end user. So for all of this, you need IoT automation. So what are the types of automation involved? So first of all, usability, reliability, compatibility, data integrity, security, functionality, and performance are to name few. So what are the usability testing as an end user? So if I am logging into a IoT application, what I'm seeing, what KPIs are shown, and why those are shown, why those KPIs are important. As a QA engineer, we have to know that. We have to understand the use case, that why I'm driving this API KPI, and how this KPI is being driven, and how backend and front end is communicating. What is the load time? What is my experience if I want to see more detail about this KPI? Where it's taking me? Is that use case valid? If it's showing the data accuracy, is it showing the data I'm requesting? So those are the important usability perspective you have to think. Reliability part of it, also the communication between UI to API, as well as the database, how the communication is happening and what is the performance of it. Since it's across the platform, you have to see how it's compatible in maybe Windows environment, Mac environment, how you are, the time zone difference is another thing, which cause a lot of security issues sometime. So how it is reacting to it, right? For example, you are creating a report based on US time zone, and when somebody log in from other part of the world, India or some other world, and there is a significant time difference, how the application is doing that. So is the data still good? The data consistency and integrity is there? Is there any security issue? So functionality, performance, those are coming along with the type of testing. So fundamental approach we have to think is, we have to not only think about that we have to automate everything, we have to understand the automation requirement also. We have to come up with the risk and how we are going to mitigate it. We have to always promote that we are not going to be done in automation for XYZ timeframe. It will be always an ongoing process, because we are going to always have new feature, and we have to continuously check, if this automation is good enough for this particular application. And as we are adding more and more feature, how is the regression going? Is that regression test still passing, or it's something new after we add the new feature, if anything break from the previous build and stuff? So we have to start simple, but we have to increase the complexity as the team skill grow. And during the entire time, we have to see that application has the good response time. Since IoT application will be multi-user and can be deployed in distributed environment, it's always a good check to see how the application is working in under stress, or with more concurrent user, how things are working. So there is definitely a proper data validation need to be happen, so that if data is flowing from UI flow to the end user flow. So the data accuracy is very, very important. So now I'm coming to the automation side of it. What do we want to automate? API, UI, performance, and scale and load test automation, right? So when we are automating our API, mostly it's a RESTful API. Then you have GraphQL. Some of the companies are using GraphQL. So GraphQL also working with the RESTful API endpoint. So if we are automating API automation, what are the things we have to come up with, right? We have different type of host. So as a test and QA engineer, we have to always think, we have to have the testing environment, we have to have the staging environment, and we have to have the production. Maybe some company have pre-production as well. So let me explain what those stages are, right? So when developers are developing their feature, they are developing in their dev environment. And when it's come to QA, when a developer basically deploy certain build and the feature are ready to test, then it basically come to testing environment. And QA have testing data there. There is no customer data. So all testing data, all simulated data, they have to test in staging environment. And then after QA is satisfied, then it goes to staging environment. Staging environment have also simulated data, but that data is more close to the customer data. How the production data is there, it's just the snapshot of it and whitewashed. So that is not customer data, but it's pretty close to the customer data. And you see the application behavior there. And then after you are satisfied with staging, then actually QA can deploy. Now, it depends on team to team that, QA is the responsible for the deployment or the DevOps team. So then it goes to the production and you see the production performance. As we are in agile world, it's become very, very hectic because most of the company have weekly release, bi-weekly release. So getting every all feature test in that particular week or within 2-week time frame, finish the test plan, test case writing, and doing current feature automation become very, very hectic. So if we don't plan properly, if we don't have the API automation right before we push it to production, it becomes very, very difficult. So what we do when we do API automation? So first of all, you have to choose the host type. Then you have to choose you have to get the API token to get host authentication call. If it is token based, then if it is not token based, then you have to pass in the key ID or access ID for authentication and then invoke the API endpoint. So these are the generic API automation what we are doing. And then definitely we are validating that response code, schema, timeout, and all this error scenario also, positive, negative. So this gives basically, okay. So this gives us very good confidence, and also we can test early, right? When developers are developing API, maybe UI is not ready yet, but we are getting a snapshot of test result and we know how the API is behaving, and it's very easy to automate and easy to maintain, and it's faster to resolution as well, and the speed and coverage of testing is pretty fast. So however you do the API automation, it can be in Python or Java, but most team are using either Python or Java. And also you can use TestNG or JUnit, however your team is designed to. So this is kind of a snapshot of how you can automate. This is just pseudo code. It will not work if you just copy and paste it, right? So this is just the sample of if you have a IoT dashboard and you want to see the total devices in the inventory, how you can, what are the things you might need. So that's what I just show the sample of it. And this is, we are in our team, we are using Python. So now come back to UI automation. So UI automation also the same thing, same as the API automation. You have 3 different stages, and then you figure out the URL and you provide the right credential. User can log into the application and invoke the UI interaction. So for example, you log into the dashboard, and from the dashboard, you have a lot of KPI. And if you click on the KPI, it should take you to the details page on that particular KPI information. So how the navigation should work, the data should populate it with the consistency. And then if you go to more dig deep with the UI and you go to more detail into that that particular detail page, then you should be able to dig deep and go further as per the software specification. So the navigation is one thing, and then also user experience. So there are a lot of data you have to pull from so many different ways. So you have to see the UI is rendering properly. If it doesn't, you have to figure out where the gap is, and if it is loading properly but it takes long time, then also you have to figure out where are the gaps and how you can solve this issue with the automation, and how UI automation is benefiting. So basically it provides at least a good percentage of assurance that internal integration is working, customer experience is going to be good, and the data validation. So definitely the production data is never in QA's hand, so they cannot actually test production data. So since we have the simulated data, we have to make sure the data validation part of it we are also taking in counter. And then UI rendering, functional regression issues, we can figure out beforehand if we have the good automation coverage. And since it is across the platform, across the browser, we have to make sure that we identify those things. How the test is running in Chrome versus Firefox is also a lot of different. And also if you run in Windows computer versus the Mac computer, then you will see the performance difference as well. So if we do good enough UI automation, then we will reduce the UI regression testing time as well. You have to identify pretty much, you have to create a golden sanity test suite where it's subset of regression, so it give enough confidence. But then when you have the overall regression automation set, that will give you much more confidence as well. So again, this is just the sample pseudocode just to figure out, if you want to search anything in that particular dashboard, how you will do. So what framework you want to use? So it's based on totally your team, what your team is trying to do, what are the use cases your team have, to choose which framework to use, and what type of test you need to be automating, and also team expertise, right? So if you have team of engineer who doesn't have any automation expertise, it's different than if you have Python expert or Java expert. Then you have to think around that side of, and a lot of company also have the behavior driven test suite. So that is also another way of automating. And then API can be Python or Java, and UI can be Selenium with Python or Java. So these are the most common common tools or common framework as a QA engineer we are using. And we can, if you thought through the use case before we jump into the automation, then you can basically use the same framework to do the UI automation and API automation, as well as the performance test automation, right? You have to come up with the, whether you can use the JMeter for the performance test and all that, how you can integrate that in your framework. That is also, before we start automating, we have to think about the framework choice, and then how all these three components work together, and how you can make your team more efficient. Basically, you have to think about all those side of it. And then performance test automation, as I was mentioning, application load time is very, very important, and is it working in particular workload? So definitely if you are logging in into your application, just one user, the performance should be perfectly fine. But think about if thousands of users are logging in at the same time, what the application expectation to be load is important. And how about if we are stretching the CPU, or doing some extreme sort of testing, how the performance differ from there. So you have to make sure your application consider all this side of the testing, and then think about the performance test automation based on that. And scale and load automation also, as I was mentioning, you have to determine the value, volume system, what it can handle, and then how it can scale if we are giving the lot of load which cannot be handled or can handle. So based on how your device under test is taking it, you can either stress by giving more load, or removing its giving more resource, or removing its resource, and make sure the system fails and recover. So we have to also think about that. If something happened and if it failed, then how it recover. Is it recovering gracefully? How things are actually. Then JMeter is one of the best performance test tool. So most of the company using JMeter for performance test. There are a lot of other tool also available, but JMeter have more of like the community. It has more documentation, it has more plugin, and for that have the shorter learning curve. Our team, we are using JMeter as well. It's an open source a tool. So if you are thinking about performance test, you can take a look, and it can create the test result also, and create the very nice test report. So what are the strategy we have to think for doing all that? It's not only the manual execution, the automation also, how you come up with the testing strategy so that we can handle all that. So first of all, you have to understand the product technical architecture, right? The use case of why we are doing that, overall application, what we are achieving by testing so and so. So end-to-end testing strategy should be there. Understanding the technical architecture is a crucial part of it, and why the team is developing this particular application. And this will help understand and prioritize things. We have to understand the list of feature, and we have to understand how we can test it, and we mention the feature scope upfront, so that everybody of the value chain is aware of it. So what are the other things you have to think about? So when you are doing the functional testing, we have to figure out, as I was mentioning, we are in agile environment, and we are doing the writing the test cases, maybe not like a waterfall environment kind of thing, that we are writing the test plan and having elaborated test cases in there. We are writing test cases maybe in the test management software. So we are using TestRail. Other companies may be using something else. So in the TestRail, you have to write all the test cases. So, and for a particular sprint, you have to come up with what you are testing and what are the test cases there. And then you have to have the one-to-one relationship between what your automation test case ID versus the TestRail test case ID, so that you have one-to-one relationship. You have to come up with the generic template, what every team members are using, so that you can have the similar test case automation, similar test case writing, and as well as similar bug reporting. So each part of it, you need to have a template for test case writing, you have to have template for bug writing, bug generation, defect generation, and you can have how you are automating also. You create the template for API, UI, and how whatever type of testing you need, you have to come up with a template so that not only one person is following it right away, every person is following the similar pattern, and it will be easy to manage as well. Also, you have to come up with the right priority, right? So if you are having a feature and you have maybe 100 test cases for that particular feature, you cannot just automate 100 test cases within 2 weeks, right? So you have to come up with the priority that, what are the test cases is more important, and how P1 test cases can be automated first, and then go from there. Also, you have to have the bug fixing SLA, so that, for example, you automate and your automation found a lot of defects, and those defects need to be fixed within the development team, and we should have the SLA for that. So if we are submitting P1 tickets and it's not getting fixed, then your automation will always be failing and blocked. So we have to come up with that, and then thinking about the checklist for the test entrance and exit criteria as well. And then you have to track the testing progress, how you are going to do that. So as a team, you need to have some metrics that you are tracking, so that you figure out how the testing progress is going for your team, and in the cross-functional teams, what are the issues are coming. You have to make sure you define your roles and responsibility for each team members, and they can, what are the risk in the test completion. So if there is a risk, you should always bring up before it happened. So instead of telling it to the leadership team last minute, you have to figure out a strategy so that you can figure out yourself that some risks are there, or team members should be trained so that they can also spoke about the risk prior hand. And the dependency also need to be tracked properly, because as you know, the IoT is dependent of many integration. So third-party application also integrated into everybody's IoT application or dashboard. It cannot just happen itself. So the third-party integration, when we are testing, it's different than actual production environment. So we have to make sure we know those dependencies and we are tracking those dependencies for the integration. And we have to do the regular automation failure analysis. If we don't do the failure analysis, there is no point of automating, in my point of view, because you have to know what our automation is catching. And if we are not having the SLA from dev that it will not be fixed properly on time, then our automation will keep failing, and that will not be doing any good. So we have to make sure we have the SLA and we act on the SLA, and we also do the failure analysis regular basis. And automation priority, so that not always P1 test cases will be the automation priority of P1 as well, right? So automation have different type of priority. How many times we are testing this particular test case, and if it is repetitive, we are doing it more often, then we have to think about this is the high priority test case, because that will give us more value. So all this thing you have to think about when we are doing testing strategy. You have to think about that. With that, I will share some takeaways. So as we know that IoT is a connection of identifying embedded devices. with existing internet infrastructure. So the complexity of software and the system may find bug in IoT technology, right? So as I was mentioning, you have to identify the issues and you have to understand what is the root cause of this issue. As a QA, you have to understand the technical architecture to identify those bugs and figure out where it's generating from. Is it system integration, or is it UI or backend issue? You have to identify that. And you have to choose the right type of testing. As I was going through, I gave you a lot of insights about what type of testing we can do and how what are the automation type you can choose. IoT testing also ensure user get the best experience. End user experience is the most important thing, because at the end user see the UI, but how those UI data visualization happen behind the scene, that QA knows. So QA are the end in the pipeline who see the overall holistic view of that particular use case. So we have to ensure that user experience is good, and we need to achieve those things by doing automation. It can be API, it can be UI automation, but automation is the key to survive in this agile environment, so that you can take some time, invest that initial hurdle to implement the test framework, test automation, and then you can enjoy the benefit. I think with that, that's all I had. Is there any question?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Dilruba. You were fantastic, and the content and the insights that you've shared together for us today was indeed very informative and helpful. You've also put in a lot of effort and time to be here with us today, so thank you very much for that too. So moving on to the Q&A section. If you have any questions from the audience side, so now is the time to ask. So feel free to put them in the chat or to turn your mics on. For now, I'll be reading some of the questions that have already been in the chat for some time now. So I'd like to start with a question from Mansoor. So what are the tools used in IoT testing?
So as I was mentioning, we are using a lot of data simulation tool. We are using the Selenium automation for UI side. We are using Selenium with Python. Different company uses different types of automation tool. They are using APM for mobile, but for our IoT security part of it, we are doing a lot of Selenium with Python, since our framework is based on Python. And we are doing also API testing on Python automation. Manual test happen, API manual test, we do Postman. We do some automation on API on Postman as well, to see that, quick test for the, if status of this particular API is showing up, error message, things are in right track. So Postman is the quick automation tool, and Python automation is also the best.
What about for the hardware part? You have mentioned about using for the hardware. What tools can be used to do the hardware testing?
Hardware testing is based on the embedded side of it, right? So it depends on which team you are part of. So if you are part of that hardware side of it, so now everything can be cloud based as well. So hardware side also we can simulate with the software. So that based on the which team, if you are in functional testing, you can test one way. If you are in system test, that's different. So for example, I can give the particular example like firewall, right? If you want to test actual hardware firewall, If you are in part of system team, you have the setup, you have to go to the lab, you have to do the setup, and you have to test, the same thing as we are testing. We have the virtual firewall, but it's doing exactly the same thing, but we have two different flavor, and each flavor we have to have different strategy of testing.
Okay, for performance testing, you have spoke about JMeter. What about scale and one more thing was, I just, sorry, I forgot it.
Scale and load, both
Yes.
can be done with JMeter. JMeter have wide range of features and plugin. So you can basically do the load testing by increasing the step. And also you can do the stress testing based on how many concurrent user you want to invoke for this particular API call and stuff.
So we have another question from Prashant. End-to-end testing is just an end result, what a user would want to achieve. But in UI automation, how is it possible to verify a complete UI?
In UI automation, definitely it is possible. So for example, I am a user and I'm logging into my IoT application dashboard, right? And when I log in, I see particular API, KPI to show me some number that my dashboard is in green, yellow, or red state, right? That I have some device identified, and it has all the attribute we need. So once we want to go through this KPI, right, how the interaction is happening behind the scene, you should know, because you know the technical architecture, where it will go, how this data will be requested from our database, whatever database we are using, it will collect from there and it will go through the analytics. And you also know what are the model will be applied and what are the suggested result will be coming back from this analytic, and how it will go through the UI if you click on the details, right? So the entire flow behind the scene, you have, once you know, then you can divide your test case by, okay, from the UI, you have the login scenario and you have the modularized version of it, right? Every step could be different ways. For example, if I click on this KPI, I can verify this in UI, what are the data I'm getting, and then you can call your API and make sure that we are getting the same data from the API also. And after it goes through the detail page, how it is behaving, that also you should know from your analytic model. So you should have a way to verify all these particular things and stitch it together so that in end user perspective, you don't see any discrepancy. You see, if I input X, I should get output Y. And if I know that, how it is getting those data, you can just have the validation for each entry point and go from there.
Okay. So there is a question from Guru Prasad. Could you please provide details on testing internet-enabled devices versus not enabled devices in IoT?
So as I was mentioning, IoT is not about only the structured data. It was about testing the unstructured data as well. So this is a good point that, what is internet enabled data, enabled device versus not enabled device. So once we are identifying a device, we are identifying it is the data is coming structured way or non-structured way. Is it connected to the internet or not? And even if it is connected, from where it is connected, the geolocation and everything is tracked. So yeah, that's the way we are identifying, and the way we are testing is based on what we are getting the raw data from. And the analyzing the raw data is also part of the testing, that how structured and non-structured data is there, how we are evaluating it, how we need to test. So you cannot test each and every type of data, but some of the generic test case you can definitely verify for structured and non-structured data.
Right. So there's another question. How to simulate or perform hardware interaction using automation IoT device testing?
You can always do simulation, right? So for example, how we are simulating the test case that concurrent user or hardware is under stress, we are simulating the traffic, right? We are creating our test script so that the particular type of data or particular type of traffic we are expecting from that device, we are basically emulating that, and we are creating the fake data we are generating with our test script and invoke it to that test execution to see how that hardware generated data is coming. It's not only hardware generated, it also sensor data, any other metadata you need to invoke, anything and everything you have to simulate basically to see how your application react to it.
Okay, so there's another question again. So can you please point out an open source IoT application for practice or on-hand experience?
I think open source, there are many demo is available. I don't think anybody have the evaluation version, but I think you can, Tableau is one good place where you can see how the application look like. Tableau have a lot of demo dashboard there, and if you Google on IoT dashboard, you can figure out many companies, maybe the image of it, maybe not actual practice one you can get, but yeah.
Right. So there's someone that actually wants to learn API testing, and would it be possible for you to provide a source to learn that from? What kind of test cases could they refer to in API testing?
So if you want to learn API testing, I would suggest go to YouTube. There are a lot of fresher starter YouTube channel is there, and you can start from there, and then you can practice all the open source APIs, right? You have Google have a lot of public API available to test, and then you have Google Map, and a lot of even healthcare data, and a lot of data is available in internet. So go through the YouTube. I would suggest that's the cheapest way to understand what are the steps needed to learn for API test, API automation. And I feel Python is a little bit more easier than Java. So if you are open to learning Python, you can start with API automation with Python, and see how if you are interested more in depth, and go from there to Java.
Yeah. Okay, so someone else would like to have you shed some light on protocols used except HTTP and MQTT.
There are a lot of protocol. Open protocol set it has for IoT. So yeah, there are wide variety of protocol there that need to be tested. So if you search on IoT open protocol, you will see at least 1,000 of them will show up. So there is not only one or two, it's 1,000 of open protocol there. And for IoT, those testing those protocol is one of the pain point for sure.
Right. So I think you mentioned about a YouTube channel before. The question here right now is, what is one channel that you would recommend, or an online platform to start learning with automation testing?
Yeah, I think there are a few automation channel I saw, and I see one of them had IoT test automation. You can go there and you can just Google it, and you can find the top view or subscription based channel. I think I forgot the name of it, but yeah, there are few of them, but one of them have multi-million subscription, and I listened to the host, and I feel that he had more content, knowledge-based content there. If you want, I can get back to you guys and provide the link.
Yeah, that would be good, I think.
Sure.
So here's another question. In what way is IoT automation different from the traditional automation?
So traditional automation, we have backend, front-end, and maybe database. These are the variety of it. But for IoT automation, I see much more, as I was saying, right? We have sensor data, we have hardware data, software data. So the data propagation is also different. So I see the infrastructure, back end, front end, and how the data are communicating, data integration are different, because you have third-party integration system most of the time. So there are a lot of different component to it.
Right. So for security, with physical devices and application, I think the question is software testing. How is that performed? What tools and techniques could be used?
So for the hardware, sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, sure. So physical devices and application software.
Mm-hmm. So in IoT, basically, that's the main use case for IoT, right? So you have the physical devices, and you have to IoT dashboard. Most of the time, what happened, you discover those devices, and you have to test on those devices, right? So how you identify it, how you are getting the data, how you are getting the metadata, basically. Based on that, you have to come up with your test cases. So each each IoT company have different way of identifying the discoverable devices, any devices, in fact, right? So it can be mobile phone, it can be your smartwatch and all that. So how you are identifying, basically, as I was mentioning, technical architecture is the key. So when you know that part of it, how the use case is designed, then you can come up with testing that particular scenario. And in order to verify that from QA side of it, once you know the flow, you can design your test case based on that. And the tricks, I will say, that you see the data integrity. For example, if I have an iPhone and I'm connected to a IoT portal, and my phone is recognized as iPhone, and it's showing the right geolocation, right thing. So all this data I'm seeing, and to verify that, also come up with the similar set of data is important. So when these two match, that means our model is working fine, and our internal use cases met. So I'm just giving you the generic version of it. I cannot go more detailed. So that's why I'm giving the more generic examples, so that you can think about it.
Yeah. So there's another question, actually. So can we use SOAP UI tool?
Definitely. As I was mentioning, right, it's based on your team's need. So what you can do with SOAP UI, maybe it will not be the 100% same as when you are using other tool, but based on your team's expertise and based on your team's need, what they need to automate, how they need to automate, and what are the scenario need to be covered. Based on those, you have to come up with your test strategy and automation strategy. And if you think that, oh, I'm going to use SOAP UI for XYZ, I'm going to use other tools from for other things. Like I want to use JMeter for performance testing, and I want to use something else for API testing. It's totally up to you. But do you want to manage it? Do you want to consolidate all the effort together? And how you want to come up with the strategy, it's totally based on your team and need.
Right. So again, going back to SOAP UI, is it useful in load and scale?
I would say it will be useful to do UI testing, load and stress testing. As far as my experience goes, I felt that JMeter will be the best tool by far, because of the wide variety of plugin, wide variety of community support is there. But definitely, if you would like to try SOAP UI for stress and load testing, you are welcome to.
Right. So is there any tool that can be used for both web and API automation? For both web and API, yeah.
So we are doing that. We created our own test infrastructure, own test framework with Python, yeah. And we combine actually all three part of it. We combined API automation, UI automation, as well as the performance test automation using JMeter, all with the Python. And we write our infrastructure such a way that we can do all these three task and manage it in the same environment.
Right. So there's a question about Postman, I think. Yeah. So could you let us know a little bit about what that is and explain what it can be used for?
Yeah, Postman is very good tool. So it's an open source tool from Google, and you can download it. And all you need to provide is the API endpoint and the authentication. So your payload you have to provide, and you have to choose how you want to test the API. So you want to test the get method, post method, you want to update, delete. Based on that call, you can choose the method, provide the endpoint, and provide the authentication. Once you run it, it will show you the response. So it's very quick, and instead of just calling the curl command, you can use Postman for validating all the manual API testing. And Postman is also very quick and easy way to automate your API. So you can create the test suite for this particular list of API call, and you can run at the Postman.
Yeah. So there's a question again, I think 2 more questions. So there's one. If I was given to test API in my company for any web application, where do I begin? Will they give me an API URL to check, or do I have to do it in my own way?
No, you need URL, API endpoint, right? How are you going to test if they don't give you API endpoint? So once you are asked to do API testing, first thing you have to ask about the API documentation. There are many ways of documenting how the API was generated. So you can ask for functional or feature specification, so that you know what are the payload for this particular API, and what is providing. Is it get call, post call, how it will generate the information, what are the response body look like, what are the response you should get, what are the error code it should provide. So all this information should be in the feature specification documentation. And some developer also do Swagger. Swagger UI basically have a quick and easy way. The way you can test it in Postman, you can test it in Swagger as well. So you just provide the endpoint, and developer already generate everything in Swagger UI. So it's basically just test data, you put it, and authentication, you put it, and you can see how the get call response and post call response, how you can post something, update something, delete something.
Right. So there's a question from Anusha. She has 3.5 years of experience in manual testing, and
Mhm.
she actually wants to start with IoT testing as her upcoming career.
Mhm.
Could you provide some websites or platforms to start with and tools and scope?
Mhm. So I would suggest to go through the, I think W3 School is one of the site that you can practice small script in any of the languages. So you can test there. And also if you want to really learn API automation and IoT automation, then take some courses in Coursera or Udemy.
Yeah.
So based on your need, you choose the course, right? If you are really interested in API testing, then take some API test course. And also there are a lot of course available in YouTube as well. There are a lot of course available in LinkedIn Learning. So there are so many platform available as a like nowadays. Before it was very difficult to get all this information. We have to always go through the books and figure out the information.
Yeah.
But now everything is in Google. You can just type one thing and you can start getting huge amount of information. So learning become much more easier. So I hope that was helpful. Yeah.
Yeah. So there are two more questions, I think. What
Sure.
are the good and appropriate features of good test automation framework? If we would like to build it in-house, what should it consist of?
I would say good testing framework is based on your team. Again and again, I'm emphasizing
Yeah.
on that because not everybody's team has the same use case, right? So for me, I think API, UI, and performance is the most important thing for my team, since we have to see the third-party integration, UI API interaction. The performance is important for our application execute load time and all that. So this is one thing, but there are a lot of team, they just care about the API. So then API framework, more robust API framework is good enough. You don't need UI if you don't have a lot of UI features, right? But if your team are more in UI based, for example, if you are in e-commerce business, right? So your UI is important because that's the only way you are connecting with the end user, right? So then more than API, you want to emphasis on UI. But how those UI are visualizing is also depend on API. So now you see the difference between the two, right? Now you have to come up with API all as well as UI.
Right. So I think this is the last question. Could you suggest some open source test reporting tool that can be used in the automation framework for reporting?
Sure. So you can use many type of test report, but if you don't want to invest too much time, I would suggest you basically modify the Python test report or the Java test report is generated through TestNG or JUnit or JMeter. So if you put some effort, you can figure out, you can modify the generated report and you can basically figure out your own way because everybody want to see the different things. But open source, there are a lot of report generation tool is available. But I think more relevant and easy way to do it is just to modify the system generated report by the Python or Java.
Right. So I think that's it for now with the Q&A, unless our audience would like to ask another question.
Mm-hmm.
So let me just double check if I missed anything.
Sure.
All right, so I think that's it for the questions. We'll just ask one more time. If anybody has any questions, please leave that in the chat, or you can even turn your mic on to ask.
Sorry to interrupt again. So do you have any certifications on this IoT testing?
So you have generic QA certification, right? You can be a certified QA engineer, but from my perspective, I don't see, certificate will give you any edge. I would say if you have the experience, that's all. That's the most important thing instead of certificate. Yeah, certificate is a kind of validation that you have done something, but if you do it and if you know your content, I think that is more valuable.
Right. So I think if we're done with the questions, I will just carry on with the closing remarks for now. Thank you so much, Ms. Dilruba.
Thank you so much for QA TechTalk community. It was my pleasure to address all the questions, and also I'm glad that the content was helpful to people.
It was really.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for that.
Thanks, Dilruba. It was very wonderful presentation and like inspiring and insightful thoughts and about excuse me, about IoT and not only IoT, API, post, JMeter. So we have covered multiple topics today. So thank you for joining with us.
My pleasure.